I think folks want to see
Republican
it fixed.
Congressman Don Bacon represents Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. Encompassing most of the Omaha area, the district is home to about 1/3 of state's population, of whom a little over 60,000 are foreign-born. Bacon's constituency is clear when it comes to whether to address first the situation at the border or 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S.
The number one issue is to solve the problem because, you know, a million and a half people coming in a year, though that number's gone down a little bit the last few months. It's very hard on schools. It's hard on our medical system, emergency rooms. I think our social services get tasked when we have unfettered immigration like we've seen there. So the majority of our district would say you have to find a way to solve the border.
What would be a solution to you? And we can start with the border security.
Right. So, you know, the president campaigned on having a border wall. And I believe the right answer was a targeted border wall in key areas. They said when the wall was put in El Paso, crime dropped significantly because there was cross-border crime every night. They put that wall up, and it really made it easier to police. And there's those cartels on the Mexican side that could not get over so easily now. And there were trains being robbed on the Texas side. And so the targeted wall lowered crime for El Paso and made it easier for Border Patrol to put their people where they needed them and funnel those who were coming over through the ports of entry. So I do support a targeted wall approach. You know, the president asked for 240 miles. I think probably in the end he would have compromised at 120. But you can't do a 2,000-mile wall. I would never advocate for that. There's areas that you don't ever need it. But in the more urban areas, it comes in handy. And so, and that was his campaign pledge. And for the other side of the aisle, say zero, when that was one of his top campaign things, I think a zero compromise does not work in this. And with two chambers in the legislature, with the House and the Senate, and a checks and balance with the president, there's going to have to be give and take.
Would the border or putting money into building the wall avoid the situation that we have currently?
I think it doesn't get to the root cause. It will help Border Patrol be able to put their manpower in a better spot. It would lower crime in certain areas where it's placed, but it does not solve the problem. Okay. I think ultimately you have two root causes. One, you have a terrible poverty and crime in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and that is something I don't know how we can solve as a country. We can maybe help, but ultimately those countries have to make the changes to grow a middle class. But the other root causes are asylum rules. And every time we put exceptions, it will be exploited. So right now we're making broader exceptions for families. And so now we see a huge increase in families coming. And so I think we have to be careful in our asylum rules because people are going to look at how the rules are written, just like tax policy. When you have a tax loophole, people use the tax loophole. Same thing here with the asylum rules.
So I see some changes in legislature. Mm-hmm. Does it relate to what you mean by immigration reform?
Yes, the asylum reform, I think, is the core of immigration reform. Okay. I also think we need to have a more balanced approach in that it can't be strict. Right now we're very family-driven, bringing extended family. What happens when we do that, we're cutting out whole countries like India that has a 30-year waiting list to come here. So I want to create a little more of a balance so we can bring in a more merit-based. I call it merit-based, but there's perhaps
employment-based.
Yes, but that's not to cut out all family. We want people to bring in their mom and dad, their son or daughter too.
One of the few Republican representatives who supports DACA youth and temporary protected status or TPS holders, Congressman Bacon is a critic of Republican Party's approach towards immigrant citizens.
I think it's a grave mistake that more folks in our party do not work overtime to reach out to our immigrant citizens who have become citizens. I'll just look at our Hispanic community in South Omaha, for example. They and I don't want to overgeneralize. We have people on, you have hardcore capitalists and hardcore people on the left, right? And so, but generally, our Hispanic citizens in South O, they're pro-life. They're pro-small business, they're pro-family. They have more Republican values than any other ethnicity group out there. But yet they feel like the Republicans don't like them because a few are tone deaf. They're not respectful. And so I'm making it one of my goals to work as hard as I can to reach out to every ethnic or immigrants who've become citizens all over this district and beyond, because they just want to know. Most immigrants want to know that we respect them, and we have not done that. And it's been a failure of our party to not reach out and do better.
The need for compromise and his voters' opinion that the situation at the border is more critical than 11 million undocumented immigrants already in the country took Bacon and his Democrat colleague, Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado, to the border, El Paso area, in early September.
We have a crisis at our border, and I think we know that. Back in January and February, I think one party was making that statement very clearly. I was hearing on the other side of the aisle, it's a manufactured crisis. Now, from May on, I think both sides of the aisle have to acknowledge this is a crisis, and we got to do something better. Congress is responsible for this. We owe it to the folks working at the border, we owe it to our country to compromise and find areas of agreement that we can go forward and fix this problem. So what can we do? What are areas that we can work on? One, we have to work on the asylum rules. The asylum rules, the way they're written today, is acting as a draw. I'll give you an example. If you're a family, you're given extra consideration and you're released into the country. So right now we're seeing more families coming in than ever. They're getting released, and then 74% do not come back to their hearings. And we're seeing also an abuse of this where 30% of the families, the mom and dads, quote, are not the mom and dad. The DNA testing shows it's a fraudulent setup. So you're seeing 30% of these kids coming in and they're being trafficked. Two, and I think this is even more important, we're going to have to get more judges and infrastructure so we can do hearings more quickly. So right now it's taken 6 to 8 months to do asylum hearings, and there's 4 or 5 hearings. It's too much. And so that's the biggest issue I think we got to solve. We got to be able to get, when a person is apprehended, within a week to 2 weeks, get these folks a hearing. If they're given asylum, then released to an NGO or non-government organization, or if they're not given asylum, sent back to their country of origin. We got to fix that part. And those are 2 areas that Jason Crow and I agree on. A third area that we know we need to give more resources to the folks working our security at the border. I don't know if he used the word crisis, but he agreed that he agreed with the 3 key things I said today. An area that we did not agree on is I think a targeted wall helps, and we heard that there. He wasn't ready to go that far. So but we can at least agree on these 3 things, and I think if Congress would operate that same way, let's move out on those 3 things. We'll come back and tackle the rest later.
Congressman, this is my observation, which can be a question as well. I'm encouraged to hear how many times you use the word compromise. Mm-hmm. Is your approach representative of your party or the Congress?
Compromise is not a well-liked word in Congress right now. If you look at our history, that's how we get things done. And when you have 2 chambers in the legislature, the Senate and the House, and you have a check and balance with the president, you have a Supreme Court, there is not my way or the highway does not work.
The frequency of the word compromise in Congressman's discourse, his vision on how to achieve it, and moreover, the effort that felt genuine to make things work prompted a question.
Are you considering running for president?
One thing at a time. I'm a believer. When I retired from the military in November 1st of 2014, I knew I wanted to get involved because I had a passion. But I had no dream of running for Congress. It was, well, first of all, we had a 16-year incumbent Republican, so I didn't even think it was an option. November when I retired, I did give a speech for a congressman, and he had an election 10 days later, or something like that. He ended up losing the 16-year incumbent, and that door opened. And then I thought maybe I shouldn't, I'd never have any experience except for being a retired general, but I had no political experience. But I went to look at other candidates that were considering, and they said, Don, we can't win. The opponent is too strong. And I just thought, no, we can beat them. Bottom line is, I felt like God opened a door, and I went in and did it. So I think for the future, I have the same premise of work hard and be ready, be as good as you can be. And you never know when a door opens or a door shuts. I'm prepared for open doors or shut doors.